encourage you to keep up the fight there at home. And there are people, you know, in your county that aren't getting the type of representation they should get in Annapolis. And I hope someday that you'll be able to, you know, help correct that. But that's another matter, I suppose. But I just wanted to absolutely, you know, and also I'm just honored to meet the other people on the panel and to talk about this really important issue. Evictions are, so I'm the House, when she talked about the committees, I'm the chair of the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness. And affordable housing and housing insecurity are issues that in the state of Maryland are extreme, particularly given the wealth that we have, the education that we have, and the access to, frankly, I believe the resources to these. COVID, the public health pandemic, has, just as it had an area of education and healthcare, just brought to light things that were already so broken. So I know for just the eviction, the fact that people can just simply be kicked out of their homes and their property, thank you for showing those images, so that this isn't just an intellectual legal exercise. You see, people's lives are being literally put on the sidewalk. And that is not something we should be doing in the state of Maryland. It's not something we should be doing anywhere. And it's good for people to really understand it. So I look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we were just kind of wanting to understand, because we're right in the middle of this pandemic, and we're in the middle of these executive orders from the state level, from the federal level, and we're also in between these moratoriums that are about to expire. And some of the people who have gotten in touch with me have been wondering, what are some things that can be done at this particular point to address what's about to come up? Because from what I was reading, August 31st, a whole lot of this stuff is really going to hit into effect, and it's really going to impact a lot of people's lives at that point.
Yeah. Well, let me just mention that I'm a professor. So if you don't mind, just a couple of minutes, I can just kind of do a little bit of the lay of the land, and then we can get into it. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Madam Moderator?
You do it, whatever you choose to do.
Why as a Baltimore City elected official or anybody that represents and lives in urban areas, why eviction is in particular an important issue for us to address is that almost 60%, it's like 57% of households that are renters are housing cost burden. That means that they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And in Baltimore, it can be up to 30, 40, 50%. So imagine this, you might be working minimum wage, or maybe you have managed to get a decent paying job, but in some markets, people are paying 50%, more than half of their income just on housing. So that's what creates this housing insecurity that we have. And so it's not an insignificant number of people. So there's this process of eviction and foreclosure where if you fail to pay rent, and you can imagine it could be really difficult to pay rent. You're paying more than half of your take-home salary on rent. You've got other expenses. And so if you're failed to pay, your landlord can seek an eviction notice, right? And then you get served this notice, and then you have to go to trial. You have to go to court. And then there's a judgment, right? It's called a warrant of restitution, and therefore the tenant no longer has the right to live there. And so then the sheriff or the constable can actually then present you with the eviction notice and then move all of your property out. Foreclosure, and I just want to mention that a little bit, it's a little different because that's when you own your home and you're not able to pay your mortgage, then a mortgage company can notice this intent to close. And it's very similar, that you can lose your ability to live in your home. You don't. It's not as easy as eviction, but they can do all kinds of things, try to do mediation. You usually have a longer period of time before you are actually lose your house. Your house can be sold. And that is something. So those two issues of eviction and foreclosure in COVID, when people are not earning the money that they have been earning, when other threats to their public health are just there, these issues are really, really huge. The moratorium was ended July 25th, and August 31st, lenders won't be able to, will begin to be able to file foreclosures. I wish I had an answer, but the answer is we should continue the eviction moratorium. But we also, that I learned being the chair of the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness, is that we also need to figure out a solution for landlords as well. So what happens in debate, and I'd love to just have a conversation about this, we often pit the renter, as the landlord. And this is a situation, this should be a symbiotic relationship. The landlord should be providing affordable, decent housing, and the tenant is providing an income for the landlord. So, but what is happening is that these two populations are pitted against each other, and we really need to figure out a way to address the stopping eviction. But we also need to make sure, and which is why I mentioned foreclosures, we have to make sure that those people who are landlords and they own their properties, that their properties aren't foreclosed on, because then they lose the properties, and then the people who are renting can then be evicted. So we've got to solve it on both sides.
Right.
I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I mean, the thing about it, I actually have been hearing a lot from a lot of local landlords who, by the way, haven't registered officially as landlords. And they're feeling like they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because they didn't expect this pandemic to happen, Senator. And my suggestion to them was to register like soon so they can start taking advantage of what may be coming up if there are more packages that do come down the line. But a large amount of landlords are very much sort of like, I'm losing money, I'm having to take out loan, I'd just rather not have the tenant in there. But I don't think they really understand that that might be a short-sighted view. And I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I think it's a short-sighted view for the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's short-sighted. Again, this is this either-or thinking. I mean, what both particularly individuals that own just one or two properties. I'm not talking about the president's son, or these big giant folks that are right now benefiting from this pandemic. But your small landlords that and also the renters, we really need to figure out a fair and equitable process where renters can't simply be evicted from their home during these periods, but also we need to figure out how can we support legitimate, and you're right, to encourage them to register, but to support your fair-minded landlords or property owners who want to have tenants, who want to provide affordable housing. I think that the challenge will be for us to figure out how do we distinguish between the two.
Yeah. So especially in urban and marginalized areas, there's underfunding in just about every department except for the criminal justice system. Now that we're going out of this situation of sort of moving towards a vaccine and possibly at some point in the next year moving towards, I guess, a different phase in COVID, because I call it a different phase. I think we're going through phases. How is that going to be addressed in those type of communities? And these communities exist in rural and suburban areas. I think people just only think of marginalized communities being urban areas, but they're in every, you could talk about the area I live at, and there's the similar issues as there are in Baltimore City. And I don't think there's the amount of investment that needs to be there originally. So I'm now thinking about like coming in the future, what kind of approaches do you think may be coming up in the General Assembly? And maybe is it something that we could discuss to maybe come up with something good?
Well, I look forward to coming back. Maybe we have this discussion again in October. Right now, a lot of the bandwidth is talking about police reform, right? Our criminal justice reform. And we know that there are these inequities there. Increasingly, we're asking about the housing instability and lifting up. And we know that communities of color, Black communities, brown communities, have always been disproportionately underfunded, right? And so I want to make a pitch right now for the census to make sure that we respond to the census. And we really have to keep our eyes closest to those who need. So I guess I'll say that there will be legislation. I mean, there continues to be desires to extend the moratorium. There continues to be, we've had some work groups in the House and the Senate that are really considering what to do about housing instability. And I do look forward. I think I want to wait a little bit before I kind of precede that. But one of the things that we know we need to get a better handle on is making sure that our correctional facilities, our hospitals, our foster care systems are not contributing to homelessness within these populations. Okay. And so, I'm thinking that, we know that 65% of the housing market is made up of homeowners. We know about 35% of the housing market is made of renters. I know there's been moves for renters to organize. There needs to just be more of that. We really need to, make sure that we're working together in alliance on these things.
Okay. I see where someone said paying more than 50% of the take-home pay is obscene. He was talking about that. I guess he's talking about. I'm sorry, he's written quite a bit, so I didn't get a chance to read it all. Okay. Yeah. Landlord, and they only own a few properties, and they don't want to go broke as well. Right. And that they're spending these type of resources. So what resources are available for people to avoid evictions? Many off the top.
So again, what's I think frustrating as a state senator right now is that we're not in session. So I know that there's a call for us. I see Sherman making his eyes, but like we're in this time where we're not able to put the laws in that we want to sort of make the change, and we need our leadership to actually call us back into session. So what we have right here now is the bully, the bullet. There are organizations that help. If you're in the system, there are some small grants through the Department of Housing and Community Development. We have some small grants, or we have had small grants, to help people avoid eviction and to avoid, getting back pay. But because of the pandemic, all of those programs are zeroed out. They don't have the money that they had before. So what we need is a governor to put more money into those resources instead of the cuts that we just experienced. But then as a legislature, we need to come back and to really figure out how do we stop subsidizing, big developers, and how do we start focusing, on making and building real affordable housing in this state.
That's a question that I really have. I noticed a large amount of the developers are not even from Maryland. I'll give you a good example. In my area, we have a whole bunch of warehouses, and a bunch of them are empty, and they've just decided to build another one that's and it's big. It's like bigger than a football stadium. And I noticed, doing some research, I noticed that this developer is not from Maryland, yet they've developed several things in my area, and I'm not going to call their name out, but I mean, I should. But the point is that I've noticed that there's a continual, it seems like they're getting breaks, and they're coming from complete different areas and just taking the money and taking advantage from our state, where I feel like our legislators need to, I'm not going to say that nobody can't come from another state to take advantage a little bit, but it's like it's overrun with outside developers. And you have to do so much research, and they're building, in my opinion, things that are not even necessary to the area. Like what they just built is actually messing with the environment. Like the wildlife is being messed up in the area. The insects are being stirred up. And of course, they claim that none of this is happening, but the people that live in that area are seeing it in real time. And so is there anything that maybe that can be done at a state level? Obviously, it can't be done now, but maybe in the next session to address
Well,
type of developers.
yeah. Well, we can, but I think I sort of gave you an answer that was broad around eviction prevention, and I meant to actually give you a very specific. There is, for anyone that's to, we do have, it's in DHCD, an eviction prevention program, and it's called the Maryland Eviction Prevention Partnership, and it's funded through community block grants, and it's eligible, anybody that's eligible in any of our counties and in Baltimore City. We are still accepting applications through August 31st. I guess I'll post it, but the email is dhcd.rentrelief@maryland.gov. So that's dhcd.rentrelief@maryland.gov, and that there is an application eligible for any tenant who can certify that their cause of their rental delinquency is related to COVID. And the applications will be collected. The way I would have organized it differently, but the application needs to be made by your property manager. And therefore everybody at a particular property can all apply. The way I would rewrite this bill, Ms. Benn, would be to individual renters to be able to make their own applications. But we do have this application process, and we do have this eviction prevention program, and some of the other jurisdictions have similar programs.
Well, since the senator is leaving real quick, does anybody on the call have any general question they would like to ask her? You can raise your hand by clicking on the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom, so I can see who you are.
I don't have it.
Okay, I see Suzanne. You could speak.
Hi. Thank you all for holding this. I'm really concerned about what's happening now that the continuation of the $600 is not happening right now.
Yeah.
And I rather expect that things will be continuing like this until the election, if not beyond, and at least until January. And that we're going to have a lot of really desperate people being homeless and wandering around. And to me, that's a crisis situation. And we have to have something in place to really help people out, because the other thing is, as I read an article in LA Progressives that says that Trump will, if Trump is not reelected, that he's going to do whatever he can to have revenge on the country, which will make things worse until January at any rate. And so we have to have something in place to, I mean, at least have places to put over people's heads. And to me, you know, like they also showed like pictures of big McMansions in LA. And I know there are empty mansions around that can be leveraged for housing. And I know also that it's possible to do something with empty housing, to rehab empty housing for, to put over people's heads for apartments and so on. And I think we really have to push not just the legislature, but like the city council and various places too, and in the county to make sure that we have something in place, because it will be a huge crisis in a few months.
You're absolutely right, Suzanne. And actually, thanks for that idea. The House Chair of the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness, Delegate Valentino Smith, and I were discussing that very scenario, that we know we have a lot of unoccupied hotels. There's going to be a lot of businesses, restaurants, all kinds of things that are going to close. What can we do to repurpose some of these buildings to provide housing? A great model in Baltimore City is the Lord Baltimore, that is allowing their hotel to be temporary housing for those that don't have a place where they could quarantine. So, if you are COVID positive and you live in a larger community and you don't want to potentially contaminate your household or infect your grandmother or your kids, you can stay there. And to my knowledge, they are the only hotel chain that has offered that. We do have hotels sitting empty. And so there should be a way that we can partner with them, if not compel them, but partner with them in some kind of way to provide housing. When I opened up my remarks, it's criminal that in one of the wealthiest states in the country, that we have the rate of homelessness that we have in Maryland. There is no reason for us to have this. So, that's one of the ideas. What can we do to repurpose housing that's going to stand vacant?
Thank you, Senator. Rich, unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah. Yes. Hello, Senator. My question is for either the special session or for the 2021 session, whichever happens. What do you think the prospects for Von Stewart's social housing bill are?
Oh, I like his social housing bill. I love Delegate Stewart and his passion and his commitment. I think now I would hope that many more legislators are sensitive that people can get into housing difficulty or economic difficulty through no fault of their own. So, one of the things I teach at Mike is a course on poverty and homelessness. And there's always been this sort of notion of the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. And that somewhere in the back of everybody's mind, and a lot of our minds as Americans and as Marylanders and a lot of legislators, is that somehow the problem that you're having is due to your own lack of planning or poor choices. Those of us that are committed to ending poverty and homelessness and having a more equitable and just world know that that's not the case. But there are others who are, and have long known that, but there are others who have now, since over the last 6 months, are truly coming to grips with that there are truly forces, structures in the world that create circumstances in which people cannot control, and that we as a society have to create supports. So I do think that type of the legislation that he's proposing is the type of thing that we should be passing.
Thank you, Senator. I saw one other hand. Who was it?
Yeah, and then I
got a roll. I know you got a roll. Anybody
sorry,
else?
I have another.
Anybody raise a hand? Okay. Well, Senator, love you. Stay safe. Wash your hands.
I will. I got my hand.
And keep in with the good fight. And thank you for coming and spending your time. Every bit of moment that you spend with us is a blessing. I'm telling you, you're a great senator, and you represent Maryland the best.
Thank you. And all the organizations that are on this call, please, this fall, our Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness will be just taking ideas of, we don't know how we're going to meet. We don't know if we're going to be, we know we're not meeting in person. We're not sure when we're going to have our briefings, but we're not going to stop making sure that we do our work to end homelessness in Maryland, really regulating evictions and doing something about making this process more fair is something that I know we're committed to doing. So please reach out to me. I'm going to type my email address in here. I meant to do that earlier. And wait, sometimes I forget it. State.md.us. No, talking and walking at the same time. Okay, there it is. So please, email me, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator. Now we are still going to continue because we still have a great guest on here as well. His name is Sherman Hardy. And so I'd like to introduce a little bit about him. Sherman, wait a sec, let me get your bio up. I'm sorry, I kind of didn't have myself together here. Sherman, a Miami, Florida native who moved to PG County in December 2012. He's a progressive thinker that has served in the United States Air Force and continues to serve the Prince George's community, a business professional and champion of social, economical, environmental, and criminal justice issues, committed to influencing positive, effective change and providing solutions to injustices. Sherman serves as a board of directors for Prince George's County Association of Realtors, one of the largest trade associations in the state of Maryland. He functions in the roles of member of the legislative committee, where he tirelessly advocates for policy to bring about affordable home ownership and protection of property rights. He also serves as a member of the Housing Opportunity for All work group that makes recommendations for a 10-year plan for affordable housing in Prince George's County. A graduate of American Military University with a bachelor's in emergency and disaster management, which Lord knows we need right now, right? Sherman has always had a sense of public and civil service. He is committed to engaging communities and government in dialogue about how to create viable solutions for the issues that our community faces. So I want you to welcome my friend, Mr. Sherman Hardy of Hardy Homes. But what I know Sherman for is activism. You see, for a year I knew him, but I didn't even know that he owned a business. I just knew him as an activist. So welcome, Sherman. That just tells you what kind of person you are. You are about your community. So how you doing tonight?
Yes. Hey, thank you guys for having me, and thank you for such a warm reception and welcome. You made me sound really good, more than I probably am. So I truly appreciate that. And to everyone else on the call, thank you for having me, and hopefully this will be a great discussion.
Well, what we're going to get, since the senator's off, we're just going to continue with the discussion as what I was going to originally do. We're going to address Trump's executive order, but first I want to talk about foreclosure courts and a little bit about foreclosures. And I know the senator kind of touched on that a little bit. Is there any way that you could kind of talk a little bit more about what people can do in terms of foreclosures outside of a normal situation of a pandemic, and then dealing with this moratorium, what they may have to deal with, with it about to expire on the 31st, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So, we are in a very precarious situation right now. And to start it off, if someone was facing a foreclosure, they have a few options. Of course, if they want to keep their home, they have the ability to go through the process of requesting a modification or, trying to work out some kind of deal on the front end. But, that isn't always the case that's going to happen, because we know that, a lot of the banks have various requirements, and they do kick out the applications, for very minute and small reasons. And that's another thing that we should definitely have a larger conversation about, is processes in these things, because, there are a lot of programs that assist people, but the ones that they empower and employ to do these type of programs, they have a way of kind of pushing certain people out of the process. But like I said, that's a conversation for another day. in Prince George's County, you know, I had a conversation with a person who is in the process of, you know, doing all the foreclosures in the county. And she said, you know, they pretty much just started back up. She said that everybody who was on the dockets before the pandemic, you know, they're sliding those through. You know, so people have to pay attention and be prepared and look out for different notices, because they said that all the defendants will be contacted to let them know that the case has restarted. But, you know, there are a lot of situations where people aren't notified, and, you know, they go about it as publicating, you know, the foreclosures and papers and stuff like that. But if you don't get those papers, or if you don't, you know, clearly monitor and pay attention, like I say, your house can be sold without you even knowing it.
Wow. So that's a really important tip right there. So everyone, make sure you're looking for yourself. If you know someone, or if you know someone who knows someone who's going through foreclosure right now, look for it, like you said, because if they're doing that in PG County, they're doing it in other counties. Because I've actually heard through the streets that they've been moving through paperwork for a while. Actually, I've heard that there really hasn't stopped, and I might be wrong, and I don't want to put out negative or wrong information out there, but I would presume that they've been accepting it. Let's say it that way. So I do know that that's correct. They've been accepting paperwork still from those who are still filing. So be on the lookout that if you know that you're in that process, look for yourself. Don't wait for a notice, okay?
And you can also go on Maryland Judiciary Case Search and look for your case on there if you still have the case number, or you can search by your personal information. But, you know, you do need to stay on top of it, because I've had clients who were, you know, attempting to do some of the other remediating factors, such as short sales and stuff like that. And, you know, my attorneys found out that, you know, one part of the bank wasn't communicating with another part of the bank, and the property had actually been sold at auction. So like I say, you know, and now that they're filing, you know, there's going to be a backlog. So for a lot of people, it's going to take a very long time. You know, just like they say, the coronavirus has a first and second wave. Well, you know, this housing crisis is going to have pretty much the same thing, and it's going to be some long-lasting consequences for that, because now you're going to, you know, the housing insecurity from going from being a homeowner and losing that into going into the rental market, where we already see it's a troublesome market in itself. And I don't know if we all remember Jimmy McMillian from the Rent is Too Damn High party. You know, we are still facing that. You know, these are some things, conversations that we should be paying attention to. I know a lot of people say that, you know, we need to do a freeze on rent, you know, different stuff like that. But it's a problem of supply and demand. And we have to focus and look at it from that part as well, because we know that so many people are going to be renters to begin with. And now that, you know, we're going to have a turnover in the market, you know, it's going to be great for, you know, sales, you know, but when it comes times for housing security and in the rental market, that market is going to be completely destabilized.
Wow. One more question before I open it to some community organizations. How does this foreclosure situation impact small business owners? Because I would suspect that they're renting and leasing, and that may be impacting their business as well. How do you?
Undoubtedly. You know, it's impactful for business owners in a multifaceted way. For those who are actually have commercial property which they're under lease, you know, it's impacting them, because a lot of them aren't able to actually use the property, you know, for the intended purpose, or at least to the full capacity. So now, you know, they are making less income or whatever it is that they need in order to pay, you know, pretty much the bills. And housing goes further, because we have to think about college students as well. You know, a lot of college students aren't able to be inside the dorms, but they still have those leases if they aren't part of the university system. So, you know, it's different parts of housing that we have to really consider and think about.
Wow. I see there is a question before we move to the next session. How will mass evictions affect the housing market and associated jobs? How will the mass evictions affect the housing market and associated jobs, by Rich Elliott?
So when you think about housing, every place that you go asks for your address when you're applying for something. They want to know where you are, if you're a local or something like that. You know, when you go to a bank, they want to know what your address is. When you go and do many other things in these areas, you need, you know, to have an address. So that's and according to Maslow, you know, that's your number one priority in the hierarchy of needs. So and I believe you said the question was, how is it's going to impact which,
The housing
can you repeat
market,
the last part of that question?
the housing market and associated jobs.
And jobs. Yeah. So when you narrow it down and you know that you need an address for those, many people can't get jobs because you actually need an address. You know, you have to have a bank account for certain jobs. You know, everything is tied to housing, and people have to understand that housing, you know, is one of the most pivotal things. Without this, you know, there are a lot of people in shelters who are trying to maintain, you know, their employment, but find it increasingly difficult, you know, because they don't always get to the shelters and stuff like that. You know, it's going to affect us for voting because you have to have an address and an ID and everything else. You know, when you don't have these certain things, it messes up your entire life. And you have to think about the children as well. You know, employment, you know, there are a lot of teens who are employed, you know, they have to be able to do stuff like that. There are a lot of families who can lose employment, and that affects the children even more because now they are housing deficient, and now they may have a problem with food choice and stuff like that. We already know that there's food deserts. So housing affects everything in that aspect.
Wow, thanks for that answer. So I'd like to open it up to some community partners and organizations out there. Is there a representative from Voices?
Right here, Jawanda Strickland Lucas. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Oh, okay. You know, I've helped a lot of people with their loan modifications, just in being an advocate, and have had some close experiences with the foreclosure crisis. This foreclosure crisis in Maryland is a real miscarriage in justice. And the courts have just failed the citizens of Maryland in this aspect. And there's been a general failure to attain the ends of justice. There's fraud on the court, misrepresentation in the foreclosure proceedings, and all these things are criminal acts that require judicial remedies that just have not been forthcoming. When you go for assistance, everything is in a box, and you hear a lot about it's just the way it is. And all of the banks and the other perpetuators of these infractions are not held accountable. You know, in the state of Maryland right now, we have legislation that is just not upheld, and it is lost in interpretation. The intent of the law has to be upheld instead of just being orchestrated to benefit the bankers and other people who benefit. You know, it's just very hard on homeowners to fight the big banks when the banks simply need to be held accountable to the laws governing. The statutes of limitations are not upheld. Loan processing practices are not upheld. The loan servicing agreements and settlements and all those things have not been upheld in the state of Maryland. And we have suffered, you know, the homeowners suffer because of this. There really needs to be, several things need to happen. There should be a moratorium on foreclosures, and I'm going to read this real quick. There should be a moratorium on the foreclosures, and not just on the new foreclosures or the federal foreclosures. There should be special penalties for banks that have not fulfilled or do not fulfill their part in any settlements or agreements. We settle and it just goes unchecked. Maryland should pursue claims on behalf of the disenfranchised citizens and homeowners from past and present wrongful actions in foreclosures that would provide adequate compensation to homeowners and relief to allow homeowners to stay in their homes. We need to investigate. We need to investigate the banks and all of the systems that have allowed this to happen. And in the investigations, when you find practices that are wrong and wrongdoing that have allowed this foreclosure crisis to come into existence and then to continue to exist, it needs to be prosecuted,
Mhm.
and prosecuted without the immunity for the banks. I'm just going to say that the Maryland legislature has to pass laws that will effectuate reform and that are enforceable. The evictions and foreclosures in this time of pandemic would be a crime against humanity and should be treated as such.
Yeah.
We cannot allow these atrocities to continue. I personally would like to see, and speak on behalf of Voices, a citizens work group organized to address the issues and concerns that have been raised in this town hall, and that would the work group should be allowed to work closely with the legislator and the legislative work groups in finding solutions and facilitating necessary reform.
Wow.
Thank you.
Very, very powerful statement. And so I think that we should pull that together. And I'm pretty sure that organizations to work together. And one of the ladies that is on the call, Denise DeServa, she asked what she could do to help. Maybe this is something that you could actually be a part of the work group, and we can come up with maybe some solutions. So I'm not sure how we're going to structure it, because obviously we're talking live right now. But I think we could start the process by, I could take down everybody's information, and then would Voices be interested in facilitating it, the process of forming these work groups, so we can actually get it started, and then we can let them take a life on their own, and I can, with the few little contacts I have, get some of my legislators really behind it, and I know they will, because they're about the people, and I mean, and that's what it's about. That's what this town hall is about, is connecting the people to the legislator and the issues to the legislature, because at the end of the day, sometimes they don't know, and sometimes we just got to give them a little extra push, right?
That's right. Let them know how their laws are being actually implemented and how they impact the people. So yes, Voices would be very happy. We would be very happy to help organize the work groups
So
and collaborate with you. Yes.
before
Go
you,
ahead, Sherman.
Sarahia, I just want to say to
Sarahia.
Joanna's point.
Okay, I'm gonna correct that. Wait a second, I'm gonna correct everybody. It's Sarahia. Everybody says it wrong.
Sarahia, I'm sorry.
But guess what? Everybody, my mom used to call me Ben. So if you call me Ben, I'll answer B. Anything. I even answer you call me S. But I'm just corrected it just for the recording.
Sarahia.
Sarahia. I'm sorry.
No, please do. Yes, please do.
But that's okay, Sherman.
And you touched on something that I definitely wanted to mention earlier, and it's about processing. Processes. For the most part, government has to do a better job of effectively working with the people for proof positive legislation, especially with the housing advocacy groups that are actually doing the work. And I say that because, with the housing voucher programs, there's a lot of complaints, that tenants don't really want to take those. And it's not necessarily because they're so much afraid now that they're going to, people on Section 8 or, housing vouchers going to tear up their properties, because we've kind of gotten over that stigma a little bit. It's more so about the process of actually getting your home approved for that. That is the main concern and complaint that a lot of people have, because there are so many requirements that the government, adds and layers on top of it. And we know that they aren't as responsive as they need to be in doing, these applications. So these are some of the smaller things that we know are problems that we can fix right away, but we have not been doing those things. And I believe in housing for all. Like when we say housing for all, we need to do housing before treatment. These are some of the things that we need to talk about, in order to bring to the forefront of light. Because as I said before, I never knew how essential housing was to a person's life until I began to do the work that I've done. Wow. Essentially, everything surrounding your life is surrounded by your zip code. And we have to understand that. Yeah.
Powerful statement, Sherman. You also made a powerful statement in the chat box while Jawanda was talking. You said lobbyists from bankers is why the policies they are the way they are. So they're spending these exorbitant amounts of monies to make sure that they're treating us the way that they're treating us. Is there another speaker from Voices? Because I think that has an impact statement possibly. Okay, Denise. Can you gotta wait a sec, let me unmute you. Wait a sec, unmute. Did you unmute yourself? There you go.
Yeah, yes, I did.
There you
Hi, my name is Denise, and I'm working with Ms. Strickland with Voices, and mostly from a veteran's perspective. I'm a veteran, and I've been working in the veteran community for about 15 years. And most people who sell houses like to sell them to veterans because of the guarantee they get. A large portion of that loan is guaranteed if they default or anything like that. But that if it does default, the veteran loses that guarantee forever. So they get a house that they probably can't afford. Most people come here from somewhere else. They're not familiar with the neighborhood. And so they end up homeless. And right now, Maryland doesn't do very good for their homeless veterans, especially the ones with families. There are very, very few places where veterans can go if they don't have any place to live and they have a family. And for women veterans, it's even worse. They'll either be housed with men, and you have women suffering from different things like sexual trauma and different things like that, and it can be very difficult. I just hope that some legislation won't forget that veterans are also becoming homeless too. And I'm going to work hard with Jawanda to find more resources so we can do something to change this problem. Thank you.
I just wanted to recognize that Denise the server, did you have a statement that you needed to say? Did you have it?
I'm pretty much answered my question. I was just looking for ways that I could possibly help.
Okay. Sherman, would you like to answer that question, or Jawanda, since you gave that great suggestion of the work group, either one of you or both of you?
I'll go ahead and let Joanna do it because she actually has an organization that deals with housing. And you probably will be able to more focus, with her organization on these related issues.
Okay, I'm actually working with several organizations that have dealt with housing, and there have been many, many initiatives across the state. I know Prince George's County has done some things in dealing with foreclosure issues. So we're going to organize work groups for the evictions piece as well as the foreclosure piece. And if you sign up, what we will do is we want to make sure that you have the information. The laws are very confusing because you have multiple laws. You have consumer protection laws. You have the rules from federal rules. You have the COMAR, which are Maryland laws. You have real estate laws. You have all of these laws, and a lot of times our judges and different people don't know it. So we would want to do training. We would want to, I know that looking at some other organizations, like I said, in order to help pull this together. And once we do that and look at how we can effectively try to make a difference in this and get advocacy for people who are in trouble. Congressman Ruppersberger's office has been very strong in working with the foreclosure piece. PJ, his name is PJ. That's the person, that's the contact there. So we're going to try to coalesce all of these different organizations and entities with all the work that has been done in order to be able to address the issues. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good start.
So,
okay.
I'll tell you this, if you get in touch with me, and I think you already gave me your email, I'm going to send out a blast email to every person who signed up with a little bit of resources, but also about this work. So, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to the senator, because I know she knows a lot of organizations that would also probably want to come together and probably make this work. And maybe we could do this a PG Hartford kind of county kind of thing too, because I mean, we're doing some unity all over, multiple communities, right? And so we could reach out and try to bring this all together and get different activists working together on this work group, because I think it could be so powerful. Because when I was doing research for this this town hall, even though I'm just like the host, I had to actually know what's going on. But doing research, I realized Maryland has very few housing laws to the benefit of tenants and homeowners. Everything is the advantage of the bank and the lender and the developer and everybody else. And they just recently actually put through a bill just before the session got out early because of COVID about renters' rights, because there's only 4 renters' rights, which is, I mean, I lived in California. I've never heard of that in my life. And that was way back in the 90s. So I was just sort of like, wow, you know, Maryland being where it's at, I was really shocked to learn where we're at. So we got a lot of work to do and a lot of time to put in. I also see where I received a statement from a community partner. So I would like to read that as well. President of Revitalization Foundation, James Strickland Lucas. There needs to be a precedent set to hold attorney firms, companies, banks accountable for illegal, fraudulent, and/or misrepresentative practices, to include the negotiation or transfer of defaulted loans, the securitization of defaulted loans, predatory lending, infractions past and present, and illegal and unethical lending practices. Maryland strong and clear legislation and recourse for infractions to make a difference in the impact of the foreclosure crisis, which has had on the citizens of this state, and ultimately to stop the perpetual disfranchisement of the people of Maryland. Wow, that is a impactful statement. A whole lot there in a short amount of time. Is there any other, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Go, Jawanda.
Okay. One of the things that I would like to address is what was said there with the securitization of a lot of the loans. One of the things that occurred is that the banks were somehow allowed to trade defaulted loans, and it's illegal to do that.
Wow.
They negotiated these loans and bundled them, pulled them and bundled them, and then sold them to investors. Now the investors sued and they reached a settlement, but yet the homeowners are still being foreclosed on, even though all of the investors have been paid. We don't know how many times these loans have been paid.
Wow.
We need to look at systems for audits. And so we need to look at both issues of the evictions as well as a lot of the aspects of the foreclosures.
Is that something similar to like the credit markets, Jawanda, where they were selling those defaulted credit card, and they were selling the credit, you know what I mean? Those credit debts to different people. Do you know what I'm talking about, Sherman?
Yeah, they were selling the accounts.
Sherman?
Yeah, yes. And in a sense, I know what you're talking about. They bundled a lot of the securities and they sold them to different companies in order to release those loans from their books and kind of, be able to lend again. But I definitely do agree with you on the aspect of auditing and investigating, because I had a similar question myself of how many times have these bundles of loans passed through different entities and hands and stuff like that. I mean, and that's also confusing for the consumer as well, and trying to figure out exactly if they owe something or if they don't. And it can also potentially cause, a title chain problem when they continuously do that like that. So, these are things that we have to steadily monitor, as you say, as well.
Okay, so we're going to go to the next section. We're going to speak a little bit about the HOME Act, but the senator's not here. Basically, the HOME Act was an act that was put through at the state level, and this is just an informational thing, to not discriminate against people based on their income. What was happening was that landlords were not allowing people who might have Section 8 or whatever type of funding funding ways, they were actually discriminating against them and rejecting their applications. So now statewide, effective October 2020, believe it or not, it's going to be statewide, effective in 6 counties right now, which is, I think, PG County, Baltimore County, Howard County, Frederick, Montgomery, and I forget the 6th one. I know it's not Hartford, but it's Worcester County, and I can't think of I'm sorry, it's just failing me right now. But as of October 2020, it'll be statewide that they will not be able to discriminate based on your income. So I'll give you a little brief understanding of why that was so. There was a veteran. She started taking care of her ill husband, and then she ended up ill after he passed. And so her income went from normal to not normal. And what ended up happening was that she wanted to live with her family in Baltimore County, but they kept rejecting her application because she had Section 8. Well, she had Section 8 because she was on part disability. It wasn't because, they always want to pin you as these irresponsible people. But, for most of her life, she had been a veteran. She had been a person who worked for 20-some years and retired. She got sick and she got in a hard place. And all of a sudden, these rules and these laws just pinned her into this box as some, bad person. And so that's why it's so important to not get into these identity kind of politics of characterizing people, because you don't know people's walk, you know what I'm saying? And start making some of these policies work, because everybody's situation is so individual, okay? So that's why it's so important that that law went through. But that's essentially the only law that's going to go through next year that has anything to do with housing. And like I said, with the renters thing, that was left in the session, so they won't be addressing that until next session if they don't do a special session. So that's far as our policy in Maryland. The next thing I wanted to address was Trump and the executive order, because people really need to be clear. And Sherman, you might want to speak on this a little bit more than I do. But in reading it, it said HUD approved mortgage and tenants. And it took a research more than a moratorium. And so any person who is really feeling safe behind that executive order, I'd suggest you not. If you can talk to the landlord, talk to them and try to, okay, thank you, S. Brown. Yeah, it didn't sound right. But I mean, for some people, they really think it was a moratorium. So I'm trying to put it out there that the language of the executive order specifically is talking more about, I'm suggesting you do some research, I'm suggesting this and suggesting that, but nowhere in there does it say, President Donald Trump is saying there's a moratorium on these loans, and that would have only covered a quarter of the market anyway, because most of the market is private, to be honest. So if you're listening to that, please don't. The best thing you can do if you're a tenant, try to work with your landlord, because and it saves them money, because going to court for eviction is not cheap. With the mortgage people, same thing. Find a way to try to work it out. My hope is that if we can get this work group together, that we can advocate to the governor to actually put in a real moratorium, because the moratorium that he just put in has a whole lot of loopholes too, where it talks about you got to prove that you were directly impacted by COVID. Well, what if you were impacted 1 month before COVID came the thing, and maybe you had COVID and they didn't diagnose it as COVID? You know, it's just you got to be careful these things, the things that they say. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go into some long soliloquy or anything, but it just do you have anything to say about the President Trump executive order, Sherman?
You really answered the greater part of what I was going to actually say. We have to understand and recognize there's what the president says, and then there's what he does. Out of his mouth, he may say, oh, I'm going to do this great bigly thing, the biggest thing we ever seen. I'm going to stop, foreclosures and moratoriums, stuff like that. He'll have his whole entire administrative thing say that, and they'll come out and you're thinking, oh, great, wonderful. I have this opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. But if you don't read the not so fine print, because it's written plain as day, all of those things are, like, as we said before, suggestions. It's saying, hey, Mr. Banker or Mr. Landlord, we would like it if you would, do some of these suggested things that we kind of researched or glanced over, instead of saying, hey, at this point across the United States of America, and this is going into my emergency management background, we should have closed down the United States in its entirety and then done what most of the other countries done, did the benefit payment. Now, as they say, you're going to pay on the front end or the back end. Right now, we're about to pay on the back end. This is going to be a very prolonged process versus when we could have just nipped this in the bud right away. So yeah, like as I said, to wrap it up, there's what he says and then there's what he does. So that's the key point of it. And that's where people have to go and study to show that self-approval.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, Jawanda, go ahead.
Okay, just to piggyback off of what you and Sherman have both said, one of the things that I feel the work group would have to address immediately will be the executive order and the moratoriums. Like you just said, Sarahia, we need to prepare to give something to the governor. We also need to prepare a petition to the legislators, even though they are not in session. And what we have to do is be very specific about the evictions piece as far as renters and the foreclosure side for the homeowners, and be specific about the request for moratoriums. There are reasons for it. Maryland should never have been one of the states that was a part of all the agreements from the past.
Right.
So what we need to do is to have this as an immediate action. So I think not Denise Perry, but Denise DeCeve, that would be something that if we could start working on that immediately, if you are willing to, is that type of petition. And we'll get together, just make sure that you give Sarahia your information and any other groups that you get, Sarahia, that we can get together in order to get this. This needs to be done immediately because the deadline of the 31st will be here. So
Yes.
We're looking at maybe 3 days out to have this done.
Correct. So I want to move into the last section. I know we've been having such a great time and this could last forever, but I want to talk about the future of housing policy a little bit with Sherman. And I don't want to take you off guard, but I know that you're an original thinker. And what do you see for the future of some housing policy? I mean, we've discussed some, actually, believe it or not, in the last 10 or 15 minutes. Do you have any other ideas for the future of housing policy in Maryland? You got to unpause yourself.
Yeah, I'll just say, let me on mute. Definitely, I think that, and as I stated, when we had a private conversation earlier, we were discussing the forum, we need legislation on housing. We don't really do that. And housing is always on the back of people's mind because, it's like, oh, I got to have a house. I got to, place to stay. It's rental. I'm buying a mortgage. But there's some devil in the details, and we need a comprehensive housing policy in the state of Maryland to protect, the consumers as well as, the business industry. But one of the things that I think that we need to pay attention to, whatever housing policy that comes about in the future, we need to address it in relation to environmental racism as well. I think those go hand in hand. We see too often how communities are changed and they're done by design. And then all of a sudden there's an onslaught of different, commercial type things that are being built, like how you're saying those warehouses are being built in their community. You really don't need them. And you're wondering why. These are the things that we have to discuss. I also would like to see us, as someone stated before, repurposing, properties. We don't have to overdevelop and, damage the environment. As you said, there is so much infrastructure around us that is dilapidating that we have not used. We need to tap into all available resources and restructuring purpose. We have to think outside the box, as you stated. And that's really in the direction where I wish that Maryland could go.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Well, does anybody else have any more questions? Possibly? Any more questions? Well, I think there was more section I was going to talk about, but I really don't even feel like I want to talk about those 3 big landlord coalitions because I don't think they deserve that much time. But if you ever get a chance to look it up, there's like a group of 23 of the biggest landlords all over Maryland that are suing 3 jurisdictions, 3 different counties, because they want to raise the rents on tenants in a pandemic. So they're suing the government. So I don't really think I'm going to spend much time talking about them, but if you can look that up. And I don't think they have a chance of heck of winning this, but really, I just think they really should be outed for how cruel and in a pandemic, the court documents are there, so it's being pushed through. Even though they said there was a moratorium, stuff is still being pushed through. So that's just an example. I just want to say that I really appreciated the panel, Sherman Hardy of Hardy Homes. Let me tell you, normally he is just an activist, but I'm going to tell you, real estate man, get Sherman Hardy, all right, of Hardy Homes. But I tell you, he's also a good friend. He's a good person. And so we're going to see him more and more. We're going to be working together more and more in the fight. And I want to thank the senator. Lord have mercy. Senator Mary Washington. What can I say about her? Like I said. And we're going to do this again. We're going to do this again in the fall after the election when everybody can kind of chill out. But we're going to do it from a slightly maybe different angle. Maybe we'll have some catch up on what we've done. And I want to thank the community groups, Voices, Vitalization, Prevention, I think, and everybody who tuned in. And if you have any more questions, feel free to contact me at sarahia@gmail.com. And I will send you some of the resources that came from this town hall. And yeah, that's right. And everything. But in summary, I just want to say that we have to definitely get this moratorium in. That to me is the biggest focus. That's the summary of this entire town hall, is to understand that we really need to have these moratoriums because we don't want to see the impact that it's going to have on our economy in Maryland. I really believe that it's not going to be the nice little thing that they can just sweep under the carpet. And I could see also a humanitarian issue above it that we didn't discuss today. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all. And this is Sarahia Benn signing off from Maryland. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later. Oh, Suzanne, I didn't see you. How you doing, Suzanne? I can't hear you. Wait a second. Let me unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say Baltimore City says hi. And Mary Washington is our senator. And don't forget Jill Carter.
I love me some Jill Carter. That's my senator, too. I'm inheriting all y'all senators. They all good.
And I fondly remember Prince George's County where I took my CERT training. So we'd like to see it in Baltimore too, especially after that explosion.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah, I'm just so happy all the people in Prince George's County who took CERT training. Now y'all know what it's for.
Yes. That's valuable. I didn't even think about that. Thank you for that, Miss Suzanne. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem.
And thank you for joining, okay?
Okay.
And please keep in touch because we want you to work in this work group with us, okay?
Oh, I'll try. I'm going to try not to put too much on my plate, but yeah, sure.
Okay, dear.
I will work on it.
Okay,
Okay.
dear. You take care. All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay.